But that's good. So Ray's up there, and Ray's been in Genesis chapter 1. And I was just planning on kind of picking up where Ray's been. I'm not going to move forward so much as I'm going to kind of come back and look at it from maybe a slightly more, weird perspective, my perspective. And I want to go into a little bit more of the idea of the concepts of the origin of the universe. You see, Genesis chapter 1 is an explanation on how the universe came into being through a process called creation. Now, it's not the only viewpoint out there. There is another viewpoint of the origin of the universe, and it's called evolution. Now, I personally find no compelling reason to believe in evolution, but I have a lot of reasons why I believe that it is actually quite hostile against the biblical faith. And I would like to kind of go over that this morning. But I want to make it clear, I'm not standing up here like I'm some kind of hoity-toity scientist or something, or that I have all this knowledge. I'm not going to try to bury you with arguments that I don't understand. I just want to present to you some observations that I've had and then let you consider the ramifications. So the first thing that I want to do is we're talking about the universe, the origin of the universe, and we need to define exactly what the universe is. If any of you have seen The Truth Project, Dr. Del Tackett uses a black box to represent the universe. I had a black box, so I'm going to use it as well. And the idea is that let's let this represent the universe. And so what we want to ask is, what exactly is inside this box? What is inside the physical universe, the natural universe? And the answer is an acronym called STEM, S-T-E-M. And it stands for space, time, energy, and matter. All that creates the universe is made up of these 4 domains. Now, what's important to note at this point is 2 things about the universe. First of all, it's finite. It's not infinite. It doesn't go on forever and ever. It has boundaries. And so that's an important concept, that there is a boundary to the physical universe. The second thing I want you to notice is that it's not eternal. It has had a beginning. Now, what I've said to you and what I've shared to you at this point is not controversial. Evolutionists believe this. Creationists believe this, that essentially the universe is made up of space, time, energy, and matter that is limited in its scope and had a beginning. Now, we are comfortable with this because we have an explanation of this in Genesis chapter 1. Evolutionists also have an origin of the universe. And their origin of the universe is called the Big Bang Theory. And the Big Bang Theory postulates that the universe and all that it contains originated from a cosmic event, a somewhat explosive event that occurred about 15 billion years ago. And so what we want to say is, well, where did this idea come from? Well, it got a lot of hold back at the turn of the century when a guy named Albert Einstein decided not to go into hair design, but into science. And when he went into science, he postulated something called the specific theory of relativity. It's an amazing concept. And it is encapsulated in a brilliant equation, E equals mc squared. We've all seen it, but I'd like to explain what that is. Its energy is equal to matter accelerated to the speed of light squared. Now check this out. Energy equals matter accelerated to the space covered by light in a certain period of time, STEM. All of the physical universe, the 4 domains of which all things are made up of, the STEM, is incorporated in this one equation. It was a brilliant equation. And what it does is it shows that they're integrally linked and that none of these things is either infinite nor eternal. Now, this was supported by some additional work following that. After Einstein came up with his equation, Hubble, with his telescopes, found out that the universe, as we observe it, is actually accelerating and is moving away from each other, as if it was all created by some form of an explosive event. And in the 60s, 2 scientists of the name of Penzias and Wilson discovered that there was background radiation throughout all of the universe. Background radiation that seems to be residual of an initial cataclysmic or anaclysmic event. And then more recently in the 90s, NASA has a COBE satellite, which stands for the Cosmic Background Explorer, and it found levels of hydrogen and lithium and deuterium and helium within outer space that would imply that there was an explosive origin to the universe. At which point, we should ask, so what? Who cares, right? You might be thinking that. At this point, you're drunk. You're like going, wrong Sunday to come. Okay. This is why it's important. Because the universe had a beginning. Aristotle, back in 400 BC, proclaimed that he knew the universe had a beginning. There had to be something that set it into motion. And so he proposed the prime mover argument. This argument then was carried on into early Christianity and amongst Jews and Muslims until it became formalized about the 10th century as the Kalam cosmological argument. Let me explain what it is. It's a pretty simple one to follow. It says that everything that has a beginning has a cause. Pretty locked tight, isn't it? Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. Now that is mind-boggling. Because we know from the physical laws of the universe that a cause has to be greater than the effect because of entropy. Everything's degrading. Everything's falling apart. The cause has to be greater than the effect. So let me rephrase this. That means that whatever caused all space must go beyond all space. Whatever caused time must extend beyond time. Whatever caused all matter must be greater than the sum of all matter. Whatever caused all energy must be more powerful than all energy. Put another way, whatever caused the natural universe must be bigger. It must be supernatural. Whatever caused the physical universe must be greater than the physical universe. It must be metaphysical. Whatever caused the normal universe, normal means observable, whatever caused the observable normal universe must be beyond that, paranormal. Whatever caused the experiential universe, the universe that we can experience, must go beyond our senses. It must be transcendent. Now, you can call this supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal, transcendent cause, whatever you will. I call it God. It is God who started the universe. It is God who is the prime mover. It is God who is the first cause. Now, I feel it's important to point out that evolutionists also have theories on this first cause. I have heard it proposed, and not by crackpots, but by respectable evolutionists, that this first cause was aliens, it was bacteria on the backs of crystals, it was infinite universes, or that it was virtual particles that come out of the quantum vacuum. Now, all of these theories are undetectable, they're unobservable, and they're immeasurable, which means they're transcendent. In other words, the evolutionary causes require faith just as much as the creation causes do. They're all faith-based beliefs. And the idea, ultimately, that nothing exploded and created everything defies logic. But let's overlook that. Okay? And let's just say, it's all here. Okay, it's all here. Does that solve evolution's problem? No, it doesn't. If you've ever looked in a science book and it talks about the origin of life, you'll always come back to this mysterious bubbling pool, this primordial ooze that's full of amino acids and proteins and has energy hit it and produces the first unicellular life forms. It's in every textbook out there. But there's no really reason for us to believe these pools ever existed until the 1950s, when two scientists, Miller and Urey, they took some inorganic gases. They took methane and ammonia, water and hydrogen, and they put them in an artificial and highly manipulated environment and shot electricity through it, and they got a residue of an amino acid. An amino acid is the building blocks of proteins. This just took the world by storm. So the Miller-Urey experiment is also in every science book that you pick up. Because the idea is that they showed this is how life started. We built these residues. Now, since they did that first experiment, it's been repeated hundreds of times by hundreds of scientists, and they've been able to produce residues, not quantifiable amounts, just quantifiable, but not huge amounts, but residues of less than half the amino acids required for life. In fact, a good portion of the amino acids that they generate are toxic to life. But it was enough that it caused Urey to postulate that in the ancient earth, there were these oceans that were approximately 10% organic material, because that's what would be necessary. Well, 10% organic material is about 100 times more concentrated than our sewage. There is not enough organic material on the planet to produce concentrations that potent on any surface water of the planet. In other words, these pools are impossible. But let's overlook that. And let's say the pools were there. Even what we might call the simplest form of life, a unicellular bacteria, even the simplest bacterias have over 100 different kinds of proteins involved in them. Those proteins are a sequence of at least 200 amino acids. Now, the odds that 200 amino acids would come into a specific form, the odds of that happening by chance are, get this, 1 in 1 times 10 to the 260th. That means it's one chance in 10 with 260 zeros beyond it. That is a ridiculously stupid number. Let me give you some means of comparison. If we will assume that the universe is 15 billion years old, and we want to convert that into seconds, that would be 1 times 10 to the 16th seconds. 16, not 260, 16th seconds, 15 billion years. It has been estimated, and is pretty widely held, that there is 1 times 10 to the 80th atomic particles in the universe. 80, not 260, 80. And with that many seconds and that many particles, it's been calculated that there is 1 times 10 to the 139th events, physical events, something bouncing off something else. There's been 1 times 10 to the 139th actual physical events in the history of the universe since its beginning. Well, then that means that there is not enough seconds or atomic particles or physical events to create even one protein. One. Not to mention the 100,000 proteins, different types of proteins that are in your body right now. And so the idea that design can come from chaos is mathematically impossible. But let's overlook that. What if we had enough proteins? What if we had enough to make an organism? I kind of considered this, and I think, could we then impart life? And I think I figured out an experiment that we could do relatively cheaply to prove that that's not possible. And it involves a frog and a Vitamix. Okay, so we take a frog and we put it in a Vitamix and we hit puree. All right? And we keep it on there until we have a frog smoothie. Okay? Then we autoclave the frog smoothie so that there's no longer any living cells left in there. Now we've got this dead frog smoothie. Now we can hand these out to as many scientists as we want to, and I can guarantee you that everything necessary for one frog is in that cup. And I'm not just talking about chemicals. I'm not just talking about amino acids. I'm not even talking about proteins. There'll be complete cells with full components inside the cell, full DNA strands inside the cell. We would have everything necessary for a frog. And you're not going to get a living organism out of that. That has never happened. Never happened. And so the idea that life can come from non-life, we don't even have a mechanism for that. There's not even a viable mechanism that's been postulated on how we get life from non-life. So it's not possible. But let's overlook that. Let's just say we've got life. Well, now that we have life, doesn't evolution Can it take over from there? Not actually. And what I would like to do is define a couple terms for you. There are two terms that are commonly used, and this is where you'll hear a lot of proof about evolution. They'll talk about microevolution and macroevolution, but I believe that these terms are purposefully deceptive, and so I'd like to rephrase those. Microevolution is adaptation. Macroevolution is evolution. And so that you can get a handle on the difference between these two terms, I'm going to use kind of a word picture for us. It's one that we should all be familiar with. If you went to Walmart and you got a box of Legos, okay? And you get the box of Legos, and on the cover of that box of Legos, there'll be a picture of that model. And maybe, let's say it's a race car. And what that means is that inside that box are all of the pieces and the instructions necessary to build that model, to build that race car. On the back of the box, there are 3 other models. And what they do is they get these like Legoologists to grab the parts in the box and make different models. And so these are alternative models that you can make from the parts inside this box. The difference between the front cover and the back cover is called adaptation. And it happens all the time, and we see it. It's a manipulation of the parts inside this box. But now go grab another box of Legos, and let's say this is a pirate ship box of Legos. Now, the pirate ship box of Legos is also filled with plastic components, the same plastic, the same composition, but the components in this box have been configured differently, unique to this box, to this model, to this pirate ship. Now, jumping and saying that I can produce this model from the parts in this box, this jump, this flight of the unicorn here, that's evolution. And that has never happened. And by never, I mean never, ever, ever, never. It's never been observed. We have not seen this jump. Now, if you look in a science book, you guys have probably seen this too. This evolutionary jump is depicted by this, it's called the tree of life. And at the bottom at the trunk, there's like a little unicellular organism. And it goes up and it branches off, and then there's elephants and giraffes and people and plants. And it's called the evolutionary tree. Okay, this is a work of fantasy. This has never been observed. If we were to actually make a diagram of what we observe, we would start at the bottom with many, many, many different kinds of animals and kinds of creatures and plants. And then they would go up, and a lot of them would start snuffing out. And there'd be fewer and fewer and fewer the higher up you go. That's called extinction. You see, what we actually observe in the physical universe is extinction, not evolution. So this idea, this propagation of this evolutionary model isn't scientific. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The scientific method, and the way this works, is that if I observe something in the universe, then I come up with a hypothesis about how that happened. And then I have to test that hypothesis through a series of experiments. So let's say I believe that if I let go of my keys, that they will fall until they reach something denser than my keys. I might come up with a theory. I'll call it the theory of gravity. And I do an experiment, and I drop my keys, and they fall. That's good, but it may have been a fluke, maybe luck. So I repeat the experiment, and I keep repeating the experiment, maybe 10 times, maybe 50 times, maybe 100 times. And if I continue to repeat the experiment under different conditions, maybe different temperatures, different elevations, different locations on the planet, and it continues to provide the same results, at some point we quit referring to it as a theory and we start referring to it as the law of gravity. I've got a hypothesis. I want to call it the hypothesis or the theory of kinds. And this is the way it works. I believe dogs will have puppies. Cats will have kittens. People will have babies, which are kind of like little humans. Squirrels will have squirrels, snakes will have snakes, fish will have fish, bacteria will have bacteria. And let's repeat experiments with this. I don't know, say several trillion times a day. And let's see if that holds true. And I believe it has held true for as long as we've ever been paying attention. I think we could call it the law of kinds, because we've never had a squirrel give birth to a fish, or a fish to a snake, or a snake to a lizard. We've never seen it at all. That just doesn't happen. Now, often in this discussion, Well, wait. Let me give some credence to something. The idea is they say, well, it happens over a very long period of time. And we have seen this adaptation. And let me tell you how we've seen the adaptation. This whole theory, obviously, is called Darwinian evolution, and it was proposed by a man named Darwin. And Darwin had been doing a series of observations. He had toured the Galapagos, and he was a naturalist, and he made a lot of observations. And he found these finches. He found these finches, and he noticed that these finches, that when they lived in isolated populations, and on different islands or in different locations, that when their food sources were different, that their beaks changed. So that depending on what food was available and how wet the environment was, they might have a short beak or a long beak or a curled beak. And so you know what Darwin discovered, very accurately so, is that when you take a creature and you place it in different environmental conditions, with enough time and enough environmental stress, finches will turn into finches. And he proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And we've been doing experiments of this kind for a long time, for about 150 years. And the one that we've done probably the most is the fruit fly, the Drosophila, okay, because they can reproduce really, really fast. And what we do is this is the idea behind it, that mutations are the way that you can change the configuration of the parts. And so that a mutation that is beneficial to the organism will be carried on. So what we did is we've taken fruit flies and we've subjected them to mutagens, radiation and chemicals, and we do things to advance the mutation process. And in 150 years of messing with fruit flies, we have done some amazing things. We can take a perfectly healthy fruit fly and we can jack it up really good. We can take a fruit fly and we can basically make it so that it's blind, so that its wings are withered, so that it can't reproduce. But here's the best part. We can make it grow a leg out of its head. But then it dies. And so after all of our experimentation, we're not seeing evolution. Now, there is another argument that they'll make, and maybe you've heard about it. It was the Human Genome Mapping Project. And it's really good. They spent a lot of money on it, billions of dollars on this, and they've mapped the human genome, which is really cool. And they've mapped other genomes. And one of the things that came out of this, and it was a big deal for a long time, but you don't hear about it so much anymore, but they said, and maybe you've heard this, chimpanzees have been found to be 98% identical to humans genetically. Have you heard that? Okay, that there's a 98% correlation. Well, and that seems like, well, that's proof of evolution, isn't it? Well, it depends on how you measure similarities. Because people have 34 sets of chromosomes, chimps have 36, so that seems like more than 2% difference. But in fact, and depending on how you make these calculations, there are some who say, no, there's only a 70% correlation. But let's overlook that. Let's take them at what they said, that there's a 98% correlation. That same method also shows us that cats are 90% identical to people and that bananas are 50% identical to people. I think I could have saved somebody a lot of money. I think if a scientist came up and handed me a picture of a banana and a picture of a chimpanzee and said, now, which one is more similar to humans? I think I could have figured it out. It's like, well, but on the picture of the chimp, he's wearing pants and a cowboy hat. Yeah, but just to respect that. Right. Oh, because we could put pants and a cowboy hat on the banana. Okay, so we won't think about that. Banana chimp, which one's more like a person? I've got a theory, but I think I need a couple $1 million to tell you the right now. And this is foolishness. This is foolishness. Similarity, and that things are similar or not similar, is not a proof of evolution. It's not, it's foolish. But this theory shapes our science, and this theory shapes our worldview. I'm going to give you one example of how it shapes our science. Taxonomy is the science of organizing and categorizing different forms of life. And the taxonomy kind of progresses like this. There's domains, and there's kingdoms, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And as you go down, it gets more and more and more and more and more specific. Let's come all the way back up here to the kingdom level. It's a very large area of separation of life forms. In the United States, we have 6 kingdoms. The rest of the world has 5 kingdoms. When I was in college, there were 4 kingdoms. So even at the grossest level of taxonomy, we seem to have some problems coming to a conclusion. But let me explain the 6 kingdoms we currently have. In the United States, we currently have 6 kingdoms, and that is plants, animals, fungi, protists, bacteria, and archaea, which is kind of a protoform of a bacteria. 4 of these categories are unicellular life forms. I'm sorry, but I think something's missing. Where's the human kingdom? Well, the humans are just part of the animal kingdom. Really? We don't rate our own. I mean, I may be kind of partial, but I think we deserve our own kingdom. I mean, we've got some stuff going for us. I mean, we developed a space program. That's kind of cool. We came up with the internet. We have a pretty highly developed athletic league organization. I mean, we're pretty special. It's not like the animal kingdom has kind of a rudimentary space program. It's not like the animal kingdom has come up with like dial-up, but nothing more, or they can't get past Division 3. We're completely different. And the people, the humans, who are trying to determine which kingdom this bacteria gets, doesn't recognize that the only organism in the universe that actually classifies anything doesn't have its own kingdom. What I'm saying here is that when we take on a bad model, a bad theory to begin with, we start jumping to some really bad conclusions. Does that make sense? And so just in taxonomy, it's foolish. Now, all this time, you notice I've been saying, but let's overlook that, but let's overlook that, but let's overlook that. But can I tell you what my real point is? I believe as Christians, we need to quit overlooking the blatant truth. The idea that nothing can produce everything is ridiculous. Chaos does not produce order. Life is not produced from non-life. Intelligence does not stem out from no intelligence. And we need to recognize the blaring truth that evolution has never been observed, never. In fact, it violates the laws of science, including the laws of physics, mathematics, chemistry, biology, and logic. But the Bible in Genesis chapter 1 says this: in the beginning, time, God, the original cause, created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. And God said, let there be light, energy, and there was light. And God created the plants and the animals according to their own kinds. And at the end, he made man in his own image. These words were written 30 centuries before modern science. And they explain what we observe perfectly and without contradiction. You see, it is the truth of God that gives us a foundation. In the Bible, there's always 2 witnesses. It says that everything must be established legally on the basis of 2 witnesses. And there are 2 witnesses for the existence of God. There is the universe and the Bible. Or if you will, there is the world and the Word. And what we find is that these show us God all the time. Evolution is wrong, but trust me, it's not weak. You and I run into people all the time that say, I see no evidence that there is a God, when they are swimming in the evidence, but they can't see it because they're wearing the blindfold of evolution. In the Psalms, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the firmaments show forth his handiwork. And in Romans, it says that the creation, since the time of creation, all that God has made it so that we can clearly see God and we can clearly understand God by looking at the things which have been made so that mankind is without excuse. We have 2 witnesses, and these witnesses work hand in hand. So the world reveals things to us about our God, and so does the Word. So when we look into the universe, we see design. We see a designer. We see information. We see intelligence, an intelligent God. We see beauty. We have an aesthetic, beautiful God. We see meaning and morality. We have a moral God. We see freedom of choice. We have a loving God. And we see this corrupted by sin. We have a patient God because he has put up with the sin that we have introduced. We see a cross. We see a saving God. And we see an end. And there is a God who is also a God of judgment. The universe, the world, and the Word explain to us who God is. And when we have a right worldview, everything clicks. Everything falls into place. Evolution is kind of a house of cards built upon sand. But the Bible stands. It's been taken on by mankind for thousands of years, and it still stands. Because it has a most compelling truth in it. It's the truth of the gospel. And it goes like this. After God created the heavens and filled them with galaxies and stars and planets, after he created the earth and he filled it with plants and animals, then he created man in his own image. When we look at the Bible, we find that the image of God is that he is a Trinity. He is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we see when we read the Bible that we are a Trinity, that we're to be preserved complete in body, soul, and spirit. Well, it is the spirit that separates us from the rest of the other kingdoms. For you see, animals have a body and animals have a soul, but animals do not have a spirit. We have a spirit. And that spirit allows us things that the animal kingdom cannot do. It is in the spirit where the conscience resides. And the conscience lets us know what is right and what is wrong. We can tell the difference between right and wrong. Not only that, we've been created with a freedom that God has. It's a divine power that we may choose. We may choose for right or for wrong. We can choose for God or we can choose against him. Which then makes us wonder, why would God allow us to choose against him? What would he be thinking that he would allow us to choose against him? And it's for a superlative truth and reality. And it's called love. You see, God created us for a loving relationship, but you can't have love without freedom. Someone could hold a gun to your head and say, "Tell me you love me." And you would probably say, "I love you," but that's not love. Love requires freedom, and freedom requires choice. God created us for a love relationship. That's an amazing truth. But we chose poorly. We chose against him. For it says that our conscience bears witness to the world. In fact, I don't care what religion you look back to, there is a common morality. It's not a common theology, but there's a common morality across the entire planet because the Lord has said that his law is written upon our hearts. We have a conscience. And so we all know that we're to honor God, but we don't. That we're not to speak against him, but we do. That we're supposed to honor our parents, but we don't. God tells us don't lie and we lie. Don't steal and we steal. Don't lust and we lust. Don't hate and we hate. Don't covet and we covet. Essentially what God says is don't sin and we sin. And because he is a sinless, holy God, and we are sinners in a corrupted creation, it creates a huge chasm, a huge delta between us and God. And it's not one that we can overcome. We can't overcome it with religion. We can't overcome it with technology. We can't overcome it with money. We can't erase our sins. We can't restore the relationship by our own power. So God came down. We can't go up. He came down. And our judgment, which is coming at us and we deserve, because it says for the wages of sin is death, we deserve death. Its judgment is coming at us like a freight train. Jesus comes down and he moves us out of the way and he takes our place. And he pays the debt we owe. And he takes the punishment we deserve. And in doing so, he puts back together the relationship that we destroyed. But he doesn't violate that image of God he placed within us. So after doing everything that was necessary to save us, he gives us a second chance to make a choice for him or against him. Will we choose him or will we choose against him? If we choose him, that's called salvation. And just like we've seen, we can't create life. As smart as we think we are, we can't create the first life. But God gave that to us. And in the same way, we can't create the second life. But when we ask God in, when we ask Jesus in, it says that he places his Holy Spirit in us, and we are born again, and we're given a second life, an eternal life. Neither of these can be created by man. They're only by God. The only thing we can do is receive them. That's where we are in the universe. That's the power of the gospel. That if we receive him, that we'll have a new life and we can be with him forever. Which goes beyond the box, doesn't it? Because the universe is going to die. But God goes beyond the universe. God goes beyond space, time, energy, and matter. And he says, and when we let him in, we do too. Then that which is born of us, that which is born of the flesh is flesh, but that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. We're to be born. We've already been born of the flesh. The Lord is calling us to be born of the Spirit. This is the power of the gospel. This is the power of truth. But we have to act upon it. And I heard an amazing statement. It was life-altering for me. I heard it this week. I heard, ignorance is stupid. And I thought, that is brilliant. Ignorance is stupid, and it is. And I'm speaking to Christians right now. We cannot afford to be ignorant because I see the church bending to the culture and bending to the opinions of men and bending to every wind and wave of philosophy and doctrine that is squeezed out of the sinful, wretched heart of man, only because we're ignorant. So that we actually literally have people who believe in the Bible who are trying to resolve themselves with an evolutionary model, when the evolutionary model is foolish. You see, truth gives us the establishment for science. Truth gives us the foundations for history, for art. It gives us the foundations for government and civilization. It gives us the foundations for marriage and family. It is what God says that works. But there's always these substitutes that are being forced into our face, and we should not be ignorant. There are people out there who say, well, all religions are the same, but it only takes a little bit of homework. It only takes a little bit of effort to show how Christianity is completely different than every other religion on the planet. It only takes a little bit of homework, a little bit of energy, a little bit of effort for us to understand the difference between what is wrong with evolution, what is right with creation. It only takes us as a people to know the Word of God and to live it, to give us a powerful voice to shut down the gates of hell and to see that the lost are saved. But we have to do that on purpose. We have to do that. We have to take what the Lord has given us, embrace it, and live it. That's when the power of truth shines. And so I want to encourage you. We should not be ignorant. Of all people, we should not be ignorant. We have the gospel.